All right, continuing on with composite functions. If I knew, like, I've got two functions here, f of x equals x squared minus 1 and g of x equals the square root of x. What if I ask something like, what is f of r? You know, I think you would quickly say that's r squared minus 1. Good. And if I said something like, what is f of z? You would say, oh, that's z squared minus 1. Good. Well, the big jump here is going to be, what if I said f of g of x? Well, what I do is I look at the x and I substitute it with whatever g of x is. So I'm going to put the square root of x in for that x. So this becomes, and I just put parentheses where the x is and drop the square root of x in there, minus 1. And now I can do some math. And this is now x minus 1. Now remember, we always got to think domain, because back in the beginning, we said square root of x. And whenever we take the square root of x, we know that x has to be greater than or equal to 0. So in our domain, 0 all the way to positive infinity. Now, I could have done that the other way around. I could have said g of f of x, which simply means I start with, you know, the g of x, right? So square root of, so I put down the square root of, and instead of putting x, now I put parentheses in here, and I drop in x squared minus 1. Now I have to look at this and say, well, I can't take the square root, so domain, I have to say, I can't take the square root of a negative number, so I have to say x squared minus 1 has got to be greater than or equal to 0. X squared has to be greater than or equal to 1, which means x itself has to be, oh, now we got two problems here. Okay, remember x squared has to be greater than or equal to 1. If I take the square root, remember that when I take the square root, I do plus or minus 1. I got to think about this one. So in order for x squared, I believe x has to be greater than or equal to 1, or x has to be less than or equal to negative 1. I think that through. All right. Now,
the video editing club is meeting right now in Z303. The video editing club is meeting right now in Z303.
so g of f of x can also be written as g of f of x, and f of g of x can also be written f of g of x, where that thing is just a real small circle.